Hi, welcome to the Getting Started series. This is a class on understanding and using homeland estimates. My name is Rhett Dabling and I am excited to be with you today. What we're going to cover today are four very high-level things that we'll talk about. The first being what are homeland estimates, sometimes known as ethnicity estimates. How are these estimates calculated? Why do my estimates change? And then, so now what? What can I do with this newfound knowledge with my homeland estimates? But first, I just want to talk just a little bit about a couple of things. When I was a kid, my grandparents had a very cool upright player piano that I would play as a kid, or more accurately, pound on and make noise, and I'm sure it drove my grandparents crazy. The piano was purchased by my grandmother's grandparents in 1913 and was given to her and then to me. The picture is my grandmother in the arms of her grandmother, the original owner of that piano. So on your screen you can see how that is passed down from her to my grandmother and to myself. In the late 1890s or early 1900s, those same grandparents bought this simple china cabinet at a furniture store in Salt Lake City. The store sticker is still on the back, faded and yellow, and it eventually made its way from my great-grandparents' home to my parents' home, where I remember it being in the dining room my entire childhood, wavy glass and all. And when my parents downsized homes, it made its way to my home. It is filled with the crystal and the dishes from my grandparents' wedding in 1944, and on your screen you see some of that crystal from their wedding as well as their engagement photo. Here is my great-great-grandfather William Orson Creer and his salt dish that is also in that china cabinet. And I think it's just so cool to see how they used salt back then. And here is his wife's hand-painted tea set with the date of 1925 written on the back. My grandmother and I had a special bond, and I miss her every day. I loved going to my grandparents' house and looking at my grandmother's Christmas village during the holiday season. And when I got a little bit older, I would spend the weekend with my grandparents at their home, just decorating for Christmas. And I loved that time together because it was just my grandparents and myself and none of the other grandkids. And I got to have them to myself for the weekend. And when my grandmother passed away, my grandpa made sure that I got her Christmas village. And each year it is proudly displayed on her piano. So why do I share these things? Each of these objects connects me to my past. They connect me to my family, and they connect me to people that I knew and loved, and to people that passed away long before I was born. And while I cherish these possessions, even more important to me is that I carry a piece of these people within me. These people are written in my DNA. So let's talk about that for just a minute. Let's touch on ethnicity estimates. You'll see four items on your screen to keep in mind as you do your DNA tests. Let's talk about reference panels first. So reference panels are created when a testing company goes out into an area and collects samples from the people that have a long family history from that specific region. Your sample is then collected via a saliva or a cheek swab, and your sample is compared against the reference panels from across the world, and it looks for similar patterns that are from specific regions. And then a lot of fancy math happens. So, as a brilliant genetic genealogist, Diane Southard calls it fancy math. And really what it is complex calculations and algorithms that look for these similarities. And keep in mind that these four bullet points are a real simplification of the complex process that happens. But this is just a real high-level understanding of what happens to there. I will include a link to Diane Southard's blog that gives you just a little bit more information, and look for that link below this video and in the class materials that will be provided. One thing to keep in mind is that estimates are estimates, and they will vary from company to company. And so let's talk just a little bit about that. What you see here on your screen here are my ethnicity estimates from Ancestry DNA and Living DNA. And at first glance, they look pretty different. But when you look closer and do just a little bit of math, they look a lot more similar. So on Ancestry DNA, you see that I've got 43% from England and Northwestern Europe and 41% from Scotland. And when you look at the Living DNA, my Great Britain and Ireland is 85.2%, but they are calculating Scotland in that percentage. So when you add the 43% and the 41%, we come out pretty close to the same totals there. They're just broken out differently from company to company, but that may not always be the case. Depending on how the reference panels were done, you will see some differences in testing companies. So different testing companies have strengths in different areas of the world. Ancestry and Living DNA have pretty good reference panels from Western Europe, where my family comes from, which is why I tested with them. Others will have strengths in other areas of the world. So take some time to research the testing companies. Look for the regions that they cover, the size of their reference panels, the size of their database that they're comparing against, and the locations of those regions that they represent. You can check out a great blog, again from Diane Southard, on her site, yourdnaguide.com. And I will include links to that. Actually, there's two blogs that you'll want to check out, and I will include links to those with this presentation. Now, why do estimates change? The number of samples from geographic regions increases over time, allowing a more refined calculation of geographic specific DNA patterns. So what I saw when I looked at my results 2 years ago, which you see here on your screen, the one processed April 16th, 2018, is different than what I see today on the other side of your screen. On your screen, you will see my test results from Living DNA. On the left are my results from April of 2018. On the right, you see the more refined results from February of 2020. And these refinements are normal and will continue to happen. So I went from 92.2% Great Britain and Ireland to 85.2%, but my results got more specific as you look through there. I now see some Southern Europe, Tuscany, which I didn't see before, and I'm more represented in Scandinavia, where I wasn't as heavily represented in 2018. So that's what's happening when your estimates change, and you should expect that they will continue to change. So knowing what we know and knowing where your ancestors lived can help you narrow down your research queries to specific regions of the world. Now that I know that I have strong ties to England and even specific areas of England, I better know where to look for records that might connect me to my family. I might also choose to learn more about the customs and the cultures of my ancestral homelands, and if I'm feeling especially motivated, I might choose to learn a new language, one that my ancestors spoke. So when we looked through those results, I saw some Scandinavian representation, so maybe I might feel a desire to learn a language specific to that area. And your draw may be different than mine, so listen to what you're feeling, but there are a lot of things we can do from knowing these ethnicity estimates. And it may be something such as planning a vacation or taking a virtual visit to these areas through Google Earth or other online resources. But take an opportunity to discover more about where your ancestors lived and where they walked and what their lives might have been like in these areas at the times when they were living. All right, so we're going to take just about 5 minutes or so and watch a fun video that we've been working hard with Diane Southard from Your DNA Guide to produce, and it gives a great explanation about ethnicity estimates. So let's take a look.
Your DNA is more than just a set of instructions that makes your eyes brown, your nose large, and your feet small. It can tell a very interesting story of your past. Because we all get half of our DNA from our mom and half from our dad, and this pattern has been going on, well, forever. The DNA that you walk around with every day has been up to some pretty amazing things. It may have constructed the Great Wall in China, scouted out the site for Machu Picchu, or sipped chocolate in Spain. We can learn about all of this gallivanting because DNA changes over time. That means that people who have lived in a certain region over hundreds and thousands of years start to develop a DNA signature that represents that place. Does your DNA tell you you're 17% Italian? That's because your DNA has a handful of itty-bitty changes that only people from Italy carry. These changes are very, very old, so that everyone from Italy has a few of them. To tease this story out of these DNA markers, scientists gather a bunch of people whose ancestors consistently come from the same place. Then they look for patterns in the DNA that are associated with specific ancestral places. This happens for various groups all over the world. We then look for these characteristics in your DNA. Of course, this process is not always so straightforward. Some populations just plain stayed put, blocked in by huge mountains or large bodies of water. Others, in places like modern-day Germany and France, had few natural barriers, and so there was more interaction with their neighbors. So your DNA is going to be much better at telling you about some populations over others. Remember, the DNA percentages you see at different testing companies are estimates, not hard facts. In fact, asking your DNA to tell you where you are from is a bit like asking the weather person if you should take an umbrella on your walk. Both of these questions have to take into account huge amounts of different kinds of data that changes over time. Because of these changes, the estimates you see today will likely be a bit different than the estimates you see next year. Each time new data is acquired by our companies, it is fed into a powerful calculator of sorts, not just once, but many, many times. These are such complicated questions with so many variables that no matter how many times you run the same data, you may get different answers. Both the weatherman and DNA testing companies take all of this data to give you the answer that is most likely according to their particular calculator. But there are other answers that are possible too. So when you receive a DNA test result that doesn't make sense, whether you see places you have never heard of, or you are missing places you know should be there, remember that your DNA is only part of the story, and that story may change over time as more data is gathered. Plus, these maps and percentages you see are only one kind of DNA data that can tell a story of our past. Other kinds of DNA markers tell us more about our recent relatives within the last 10 generations. These larger blocks of shared DNA can tell us about specific people that we are genetically connected to, which you may be able to trace on your family tree. As companies begin to leverage a combination of other people's DNA and genealogy, your DNA may also connect you to more recent historical events that influenced human populations, like the Irish Great Famine Migration, the settling of Appalachia, or to founding Africans in the Caribbean. So what now? What does all of this have to do with you today? Perhaps as you are going about your day today, you will remember that you are more than just the you of today. Those percentages don't just indicate connections to vast swaths of land with rolling hills or harsh deserts. Those numbers represent connections to real people, your people. You are a completely unique composition of the lives and experiences of all the people who came before you. So it's time to learn about them. Time to find out who is behind that where in your DNA. So ask a relative, find a picture, or explore your genetic homelands to find out what life was like in that place. And remember, If you're wondering if you can hurdle that next challenge or climb that next mountain, you can. Your DNA has already done it.
All right, I hope you found that video helpful. As we wrap up, I just wanted to share a few additional resources that you might find beneficial. The first being, these are in no specific order, but the FamilySearch.org website has some pages built around DNA education. So if you go to FamilySearch.org/DNA, you'll find a wealth of information there. They also have a number of wiki articles designed to help you with your DNA research and understanding ethnicity. Each of the testing companies have help centers on their websites that will tell you about their reference panels and how they've been developed and grown. There is an organization known as ISOG, the International Society of Genetic Genealogists, and you can visit their webpage. It's just there. If you Google ISOG, then there is a wealth of information on that page, and it is designed to help us at a beginner level as well. I've mentioned Diane Southard a few times during this presentation. You can find her website at yourdnaguide.com. There's a wealth of information there. Blaine Bettinger, the genetic genealogist, has a lot of information. Dana Leeds of danaleeds.com and DNA color clustering is helpful. Leah Larkin, the DNA Geek, and Roberta Estes, DNA Explained. And I will include links to all of this in the class material. And there's a lot more than what I've listed here on the page. So take some time to do some research. I would start with what you see here on the screen and let that guide your search. So I hope you have found this session helpful, and enjoy the rest of your time with Roots Tech Connect. Have a great day. Bye.